Just to remind you some of the formalities. So we are live streaming on the council's YouTube channel. It would be great if both members and officers can keep your cameras on where possible and mute when not speaking. Please use your raise hand function for wanting to speak rather than actually raising your hand. And can you ask questions verbally? So the chats are only for admin, not for questions. That will allow anyone listening to have the same access to the questions as everybody else. Great. So I'm going to start with the standing items, kicking off right now. So there have been no apologies received. Are there any declarations of interest? Excellent. And the third item is the chair's announcements, and I don't have any. So we are rapidly moving on to the minutes. So I just want to check in here on whether everybody agrees that we can approve the notes from the 10th of September meeting or comment on any amendments if you have them. Please raise your hands. I'm going to assume that that is consent. So let me know if I'm incorrect, verbally or with your hand raised. Otherwise, we can approve the minutes of the 10th of September. Great. We are rattling through this. So I'm going to suggest that we take items 7, 8, 9, and 10 next from the agenda, and then after that, items 5 and 11, because that will make the best use of officer time. Councillor Harley. I can't hear you. I think you're on mute.
Sorry, my broadband cut out while you were discussing the minutes.
Apologies.
I just had a question about the bullet point under item 14, annual air quality status report, that refers to the air quality monitoring on Hollow Way. It's on page 12, Great. Third bullet point down on the list. And I don't quite understand the statement which says there were no limitations to the current air quality monitoring capacity on Hollow Way and the surrounding area. I had understood that there were limitations as opposed to no limitations. And I wonder if that could just be clarified.
Yeah, I'm just actually, I can't find it because it doesn't come up on page 14 for me.
No, it's on page 12.
Yes, great. Okay, good.
Under the heading 14. And it's on my page.
Understood.
12,
sorry. Yes, understood. Sorry, Councillor Harley. Understood. Yes. Okay. So I can see it. I just now can't. And it's the fourth bullet you said. There were no limitations.
No, it's the third.
Oh, yeah, on Hollow Way and the surrounding area. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't quite understand that statement.
Pedro, could I maybe get you to clarify that?
Sorry, can I have access to the document, because I don't know.
Sorry, it's in the public agenda. Let me just send it over via the chat. There. So just for everyone to clarify, well, it's actually in the chat now, but that is from the public agenda document, the kind of the detail behind it. So, and then that's page 11. No, it's not. It's page 12, as Councillor Harley said, under the minutes of item number 14. So it's as again, Councillor Harley said, it is the fourth bullet point or the third bullet point on the top of page 12. Can everybody see the document that we're discussing? I think it's just a point of clarity, which is why I'm passing it to you, Pedro, in order to understand what the details of what that bullet point means about no limitations to the current air monitoring capacity on Hollow Way.
Okay, so it can mean one of two things, because I remember that we've discussed on that particular climate panel meeting, we've discussed the difference between automatic monitoring and diffusion tubes. And so from that perspective, there is a limitation on Hollow Way in the sense that an automatic monitoring station, which is a much more robust monitoring technique, will not be able to be installed at Hollow Way because there are requirements for space and access to electricity and all of those things. But but I'm not sure if that was the reason why that point was added in there. The truth is that we do monitor air quality levels on Holloway. We have a diffusion tube in there, which is giving us very useful annual mean nitrogen dioxide data, which we can compare against the legislation and against our own local annual mean target. So from that perspective, there should be no limitations to the way air quality is being monitored in there.
So it sounds to me then, okay. So it's just
I think there were a few typos on the first version of the minutes, and I remember to have sent a few comments amending some of those typos, and I think this was one of them, if I remember correctly.
So it's I guess I suggest that we might need to expand. So I suppose we need to minute now that the minutes were approved, other than this point, which needs more clarification. Celeste, does that sound like a sensible?
Yes, noted that, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah. So we need to minute now that that point needs to be clarified with Pedro, and then we can circulate. Are we allowed to circulate after the meeting to just check that everyone's happy with the updated version of this? Is that could just seem otherwise we'd have to approve 2 sets of minutes in the next meeting. I'm just trying to avoid a way of doing that if this is a very minor point, Celeste, process here. Yeah.
Yes, Chair. So the minutes that's already been published will not be amended. Instead, the amendment will come with the minutes that come out of this meeting.
Fine. Okay. Thank you for that process clarification. Councillor Harley, does that sound like a sensible approach?
It does. I had understood
You've cut again.
There were limitations, and it was that the limits were the type of equipment. I had understood the limitations were due to the type of equipment.
Councillor Harley, apologies, you're cutting out. I might suggest that you kill your camera and just do it over audio, because then we could probably hear you better.
And that the monitoring was only, I don't know if that's, sorry, can you hear me?
We can now.
Okay. I had understood that the limitations were due to the equipment, as Pedro says, and that the air quality monitoring was only done periodically on a very limited basis. That was my understanding following the last discussion.
Sorry, can I add? I was able to retrieve the actual document where I suggested some amendments, and it was actually me who added the words "no limitations," because the limitation that has to do with the equipment is valid for the entire of Oxford, for all the locations where we monitor with diffusion tubes. So we only have 3 automatic monitoring stations. So it's not a limitation that is specific to Holloway, if that makes sense. It's a limitation of the type of equipment that we have to monitor. So, but it's not a limitation per se that prevents us, that is unique to Holloway. This is just how we monitor air quality. We can't install those automatic monitoring stations in every single location throughout the city, because they are very bulky and very expensive to run on an annual basis. So because of that, we run an automatic monitoring network of 130 diffusion tubes, and the one that we have in Holloway is just one of them. So that's why I think, you know, this limitation is general, it's not specific to. So that's why I said that there's no limitation in the sense that we still get air quality data from the monitor that we have in there. It's just that monitoring technique that we use in there has its own limitations, if that makes sense.
Understood. Essentially, there are a number of different ways of monitoring air quality, some of which are more accurate, some of which are bigger. There's a whole load of trade-offs that we have to make in any scenario when we are monitoring air quality, right? Those limitations are the same across the city for any location that we choose, either option A, option B, or option C. And there's no additional limitations on Holloway.
It's just that the way it's written on the notes, it makes it makes people think that it's a limitation that it's specific to that location when
Yeah,
it's not.
It's not. It's just how we monitor air.
Exactly.
Councillor Harley.
If there could be an amendment to just clarify where the limitations are, where they apply. So would it be possible to amend that section just to clarify that the limitations are due to the equipment, the limitations apply in a number of areas, just to you know.
Yeah, maybe a generic
Because
bullet point that talks about the limitations between the two
Yeah.
different monitoring techniques, but
Yes.
that applies
Yeah,
overall,
it
not
would be helpful if that could be
without mentioning
clarified.
Holloway then, so that people don't get
Absolutely.
confused.
I think that would be, I completely agree with Councillor Harley. I think that's exactly the way we should do it. Celeste, are you up for that? Great. So we can take that as an action. And Pedro and Celeste, if you can work together just to ensure that the wording of that is clear, because I think as you know, as it's illustrated, it can cause confusion. So let's make sure that we get that clear. Great. Sorry, I muted myself. Other than that, is everyone happy with the minutes? Excellent. Thank you all. I will move on to the next item. Give me a second as I click through. Great. So net zero master plan, I believe, is the next item, agenda item 7, but obviously 5 in our agenda now. I'm so it'd be great to welcome Councillor Railton. I assume you're on, Mish, Tala and Tina Mould. And can you present the net zero update?
I'm going to pass this over to Tina, if that's okay, Chair.
Excellent, please.
That's fine with me. So as per the papers and the information I sent over, do you want me to share it on the screen, or are you okay looking at it? So probably
it would be really helpful if you can share it on the screen, just because then we're in the same place.
okay.
Seconds.
Does that work?
It now works. Yes, great.
Great. So if I start with the 2030 ones. So number 4, which was there's not loads of updates this time, but the ones that we do have, action number 4, which was commissioning feasibility studies to assess land assets for sustainability measures. We're doing good progress work on BNG potential on City Council land. So that project is sort of continuing and moving forward well. We've managed to carry out baseline ecological assessments on 8 plots of land, one of which is being discounted because it doesn't have enough sufficient potential for net gain, but the other ones do. And now we're basically looking and working through the processes that would be needed to enable that BNG on our own land. And basically the outcome is to provide BNG only for City Council developments, related developments. The renewables feasibility study is not currently resourced at the moment still, so we're not making much progress on that. Any questions on that one before I move on to the next one? I can't see everybody now, so somebody's going to, oh yeah, I can now.
No questions that I can see.
And then moving on to carbon literacy. So the course is now progressing pretty well in the council. We've got 2 options for training. It's a reasonably long course. It's roughly around a day. So there's a staggered course over a number of days for people who are particularly busy, and a course and a sort of condensed course over a day for others. We've done around 10% or just over 10% of the 240 people we want to put through in the next 2 years. We've got courses planned for November, December and January, and we're making relatively good progress on working our way through that. So we also propose to treat this now as business as usual and sort of take this off the tracker to be monitored moving forward.
Great. I love that as an option, and fully support removing things from trackers. It might be good to have an update after 12 months or something. Is that possible?
That's fine.
Just to kind of, I may not be chair, etc., but I think it's useful to not update us every single time, but maybe give us where you get to after 50% of the time is elapsed. I think would be helpful.
Perfect.
But please do remove it so we don't have to talk about it every time. And
That's
congratulations on sorting it out, because I know we discussed that last time. Great.
Brilliant. now moving on to 2040 updates, unless there's
Yep.
anything else on that one. So I think mainly these ones here that we've got updates on is the Share Prosperity Fund and Green Skills Training, and then local plan update. And this actually didn't translate very well into a PDF, but basically that's also going reasonably well now. So in round one, or so far in the training that we've undertaken, this is basically where we put out skills funding and enable local businesses to get free skills training. And round one of that, we've now got around 35 individuals from various organisations doing air source heat pump training and 8 to 9 solar PV ones. We opened the next round in the 1st of November, and to a much wider audience, and there's quite a lot of PR and comms now through the council website, and we've seen a lot of increased interest through that, and we plan to move straight from round 2 into round 3. So feeling much more confident that we can work our way through the funding that was allocated for that.
Excellent.
And also hoping that we will continue to obtain some funding for next year as well. And then moving on to processes and technical advice support for the local plan 2040. So we're still continuing to do that. We're working very closely with our planning colleagues on looking at the energy use intensity technical work, and also how we will actually carry out offsetting process. But obviously now it's slightly delayed, and we're doing a slightly slower process because of where we are in the position of the local plan.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about it on those ones. I think that's all of it on the 2040 update as well. So unless anybody's got any questions on those, I think we're complete.
Great. Over to questions. Does anybody else have any questions?
Great.
I did have a question. Could you shove over to the left-hand side? Sorry, Tina, and that's quite annoying.
Of course we can.
Items.
Down anywhere?
No, that's good. That's good. So I'm just looking at I'm just thinking, coming back to the item 16, the first item on the agenda, the only one basically that's kind of orange. So that's why I'm interested in it. Is it just the lack of resource? So that's a comment on the RAG status. Is there anything else? It sounds like it is just resourcing capacity. So
it is. We've just done our 4th round of recruitment for an ecologist and not managed to get a full-time person.
Fine.
And since about March this year. So we've got 2 contractors in situ, and we're doing our best. We've just started again, so we're doing our best to try and manage all of the planning requirements, and biodiversity strategy is sort of part of the queue, but not at the forefront at the moment because the planning element has to come first. So
understood. Great. Thank you. That's clear. And the due date is January 25 on that item as well. Just sort of delayed. Yeah.
I think it's actually January 26 that we have to have an update on where we are in relation to the Environment Act. But
excellent. So then I think that just needs changing in the it's ready, because otherwise the kind of resource delay rang.
James will correct me if I'm wrong. But I think that's right. So
excellent. Councillor Fry, James. Sorry, other James. James, is that correct?
We will confirm that and update.
Thank you. Councillor Miles.
It was just a clarification whether the ecologist resourcing issue is a wider sector challenge, or is it specific to Oxford?
It's a major challenge due to things like the LRS and also all the BNG work that's being carried out. So yeah, it's a major challenge, and we've increased salaries and all the bits and pieces, and we're actually very, very competitive in relation, but still struggling. And by nature, I think James and I've discussed this loads of times, ecologists want to be outdoors often, as much as they can. And so we're doing our best to see what we can do to find other solutions. So
great, thank you. Any further questions from anybody? Lovely. Excellent. No further questions. Let me just go back to my running order. Well, I mean, are there any? I mean, it feels like we've done questions. Are there any recommendations? I don't know. It feels like there may not be, but please, councillors, raise your hand if you have any recommendations based on any of this. I'm going to this may be other than the two small tweaks, Celeste, which we just mentioned, you know, as in just clarifying that whether we're talking January 25 or January 26, that's actually the sole. That's hardly a recommendation. That's just a clarification. And is there? Sounds like there's nothing else. In which case, I will thank Mish and Tina for attending, and you're obviously welcome to stay if you wish. But otherwise, thank you for taking the time. Appreciated. And yeah. Thank you. Good. Okay, so I'm now going to move to the Eco Mornings, Eco More Rings project update. So welcome, Councillor Railton and Pedro. You know that I'm a very big fan of this project, so I'm very excited to see the update. I'm going to invite Councillor Fry. Are you wanting to speak? Or I was planning to invite Councillor Railton and Pedro to speak on this item.
No, I was only interested to hear. I had a meeting with Pedro this morning, and I think he knows my questions. Yeah.
Perfect. That makes sense. And you're obviously the ward councillor, so it's going to be helpful to have you speak. But I will let me start. Councillor Railton and Pedro, and then Councillor Fry, you can obviously come in, and thank you for attending as a guest speaker. Great. Councillor Railton or Pedro, over to you.
Hi everyone. So I did send a presentation, I think, a couple of weeks ago. So see
and
if
just for the benefit of people watching online, I'm afraid I'm going to ask you to put it up again.
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. No, sure. Yeah.
Oh, what a nice picture.
Right. So Eco Moorings project update. Little bit of background first. So this is a project that is going to be delivered in a specific stretch of the canal of the Oxford Waterways called Aristotle Lane, where we have visitors moorings, which are kind of managed by the Canal and River Trusts. So this is an area that historically has been receiving a lot of smoke nuisance complaints because there's a lot of residential areas opposite the moorings. And it's been quite frustrating. So these residents are finding it difficult to deal with the situation, and there's like legally very few powers or almost no powers that can be actioned to kind of sort the situation at the moment. So with this in mind, obviously this is an issue that causes lots of health impacts to visitors, residents, and also to boaters who are the first on the front line of exposure to the fine particulate emissions that come out of burning solid fuels, particularly coal and wood. So with this is the background. We have with all this in mind, we have kind of managed to secure a bit of funding from the EFRA's Air Quality Grant in the financial year of 2022-2023, 192,000, well, almost 200,000 pounds to kind of for the installation, for us to try to install some eco moorings in here. So the eco moorings are that we are intending to install in here are 3 pedestals where we can kind of provide electricity to boaters so that they can stop relying on diesel generators and also on reduce their reliance on their wood burning. So with the intention of reducing emissions. So with regards to the project, so this is being delivered in partnership with the Canal and River Trusts. So they are effectively project managing the delivery of this. So as I said, there's a space for 6 moored vessels at Aristotle Lane. Those 3 pedestals will have, each pedestal will have 2 16 amp sockets. So those are normal sockets that provide access to electricity. And in one of them, we will trial a 32 amp socket And this is so that we can have some kind of availability to trial electric propulsion. So we know that the market is for electric boats is developing fast. There's a few kind of companies that are already kind of retrofitting boats in the area, and so we thought it could be a good idea to leave kind of one socket already ready if kind of suddenly we start having an influx of electric boats. And all the objective is also for the other 5 sockets to be easily kind of already kind of installed with the capability for the 32 amp if we need. So in terms of the expected outcomes, obviously the most important one, reduce the levels of exposure of air pollutants by residents, towpath users and commuters. Obviously contribute to a significant reduction of smoke nuisance complaints by residents in this area of the city. Another important issue here is the, contribution to an overall reduction of particulate pollution in Oxford, particularly PM10 and PM2.5, because we know that these pollutants can travel long distance. So any kind of pollution that is being emitted by boaters along the waterways can be potentially can travel and can be kind of other people in other areas of the city can be exposed to it. And then there's another important angle to this, which is the engagement aspect. So you all are aware that we have recently made plans to expand our smoke control area. So this project will be in place from the 1st of December. At the same time, we recently have kind of launched the wood burning campaign, Do You Fuel Good, where we kind of provide specific advice to residents about the negative impacts of exposure to particulates that come from burning of solid fuel. And also where we provide best practice and advice on how to burn as efficiently as possible. So we want this project to link quite well with these 2 kind of items. And we have a new person now on board, which started with us in the beginning of October, Charles. He is our new environmental sustainability engagement officer. Most of his time will be dedicated to this project to do direct engagement with boaters, to tell them exactly how to operate the future eco moorings, but also providing all these bits and pieces of advice on the health aspects, and also pointing out to possible future retrofitting schemes and grants that boaters can use to kind of retrofit their boats to cleaner energy, so that they can use cleaner energy sources. Timelines. So this is just for you to have an idea. We got the grant funding in April 2023. It took us 6 months to actually sort out the partnership agreement and sign it between Oxford City Council and the Canal and River Trust. So this was, I honestly didn't think it was gonna take so much time, but we had lawyers from both sides interacting, and it's how it works with lawyers. They're always very busy. It takes a lot of time for things to kind of bounce from one side to the other. So we finally got there at the end of October. We've signed the partnership agreement. In January 2024, we already had kind of a final agreement on the design specifications for the installation, which is the slide that I'm going to show to you next. In February, the project was submitted formally to our planning colleagues at Oxford City Council. So under general permitted developments, which means that there was no need to actually kind of well, they were exempt from planning permission, in essence. Then in September 2024, the Canal and River Trust finalized the procurement exercise to appoint the contractors that are going to be kind of on site installing the infrastructure. And I forgot to mention, but I've mentioned it before, in October, early October, we had our Charles McQuire, our engagement officer, who is now at the moment on the process of kind of gathering information. So he's meeting people from the trusts. He already did a couple of site visitors with the ranger officer from the kind of Canal and River Trust. He had meetings with the Boating Association. He met today Councillor James Fry. He's meeting a few boaters. Some of them are colleagues that work for both Oxfordshire County Council and City Council. So he's building slowly his network so that we can start kind of thinking about kind of proper engagement when the eco moorings get installed. So this is kind of the design. What you see in orange is the stretch of the canal that is managed by the trust, the visitors moorings. So the plan is to kind of install 3 pedestals, as I said, similar to the one that we see on the picture. They're spaced 25 meters apart so that we could ensure that kind of there's good coverage for all the 6 mooring spaces, existing mooring spaces on that section of the canal. So at the moment, in terms of next steps, and this is the timeline that I had and still have, hasn't suffered any alterations, but it might change. So we are at the moment still waiting for formal confirmation from the contractors with regards to their work program and timeline. This is kind of submission of this to the trust and to us is imminent. And at the same time, we are exploring with the county the temporary traffic restriction order application, which needs to kind of need to be submitted so that we can ensure that people can continue to use safely the right public of way during the construction phase. So if you see, going back to the drawing, there is for those who know the area, there's a playing area and there's a park close to the bridge in the north side of the visitors mooring. So the plan will be to kind of create a bypass that allows people that come from the north, instead of using the towpath, entering via the play area, and then there's an entry into the path again immediately at the end of the visitors mooring. So in essence, it means that people could continue to use the public right of way without interfering with the construction. So that's what we are trying to see if we can approve. So normally a temporary traffic restriction order takes 12 months for Oxfordshire County Council to approve, but you can kind of pay more. Normally that's always the case. If you pay more, you have you can submit an emergency kind of TTRO, and that's kind of that's processed immediately. So we are still hoping that we can kind of commence installation already in this year, December, with the expected completion of the project around January. This I'm talking about obviously the infrastructure, because then the engagement piece will continue, because we will have Charles with us for the next 18 months.
Great.
And I think this is it. I'll stop sharing now.
Excellent, Pedro. Thank you for a clear presentation with timeline. I have a few questions, but we will all have questions. And prior to that, Councillor Fry, did you want to speak? I was going to suggest that you spoke, you know, as the guest speaker, and then we can ask questions of both you and Pedro, if that sounds sensible at the same time.
That's very kind. I mean, this project, believe it or not, began about 12 years ago, and it's taken this long. I mean, it's wonderful that we've got the funding and so on. There were just one or two questions I raised actually with Pedro and Charlie this morning, which are relevant to this. One thing is these are temporary moorings, so the people who'll use them are continuous cruisers, which are harder to engage with than the permanent moorings further up Agenda 21 or down by Hythe Bridge. So it will be a bit of a challenge to get these people who, some of whom are hiring from cruising companies, to get them to know all about this, because it is a temporary mooring, it's not meant to be permanent. So that's one challenge. Another challenge, which I'm sure is being allowed for, is how do the boats have to have special cabling or something to take advantage of these charging points? That I don't know. But yes, a further point, which is actually citywide, is the problem with PM 2.5 is that it's not specific to where the smoke is discharged. And therefore, I was lucky. I was, with the help of some local residents, were able to get funding to install, I think in all, it's getting up for 30 what are called purple air monitors.
Oh, great. Yeah,
all over the city. And there's, it's actually a professor at Nuffield, who I know well, who's one of the people who put in his own money. And he is meant to be doing all, he's a busy professor, but he is, and he's not a professor of environmental anything, he's economics, but he's meant to do the monitoring, to calibrate, to make it consistent with the two PM 2.5 monitors that Pedro has. I think they're both in St. Epps, I can't remember for sure, but we want everything to be consistent in terms of monitoring. So one of the aims of this is, if you like, to be able to see to some extent a before and after, but it'll be very valuable also for wood burning stoves and all these other issues we are concerned about. I mean, the last thing which Pedro was telling me today is that there's, you probably know, there was a similar scheme in Islington, which is longer standing. I don't know whether that's continuous cruisers or just permanent moorings, but there is a report that Pedro says is coming out almost any day. And I believe we can then get the advantage of seeing their experience in trying to get people to sign up to electric charging. So we're not pioneers in that sense, but we might be for continuous cruising. But certainly, I think it's wonderful that we've managed to get this far. It's just taken one hell of a long time, and we've managed to get the grant funding. So congratulations. It was to my Jarvis to some extent, and then Pedro ran with the project, and we've got it where it is now.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Fry. I am going to open for questions to both you as the ward councillor, and given you've just spoken, and to Pedro in just a second. I'm just going to first frame your questions, the ones that I think are particularly good ones, back to Pedro, which is just to clarify the point around temporary cables. Then is whatever are the devices that the boats plug into the kind of cables that people will have anyway, or is it like electric cars where you have to kind of install a separate? That's one question that Councillor Fry asked. And then just, yeah, is the Islington temporary cruisers or is it permanent moorings?
So Islington is temporary cruisers as well.
So we can learn from them.
Exactly. It's in many ways, it's very, very similar to our project. What they did, and the report that Councillor James Fry was mentioning now is a report that is going to come out hopefully by the end of this month, and it will inform on the results obtained out of these kind of two, which it was supposed to be 2-year transitional period, which turned into 3 years in the end, whereby the use of solid fuel was still allowed at the moorings, but strongly discouraged. And so during this 2 almost 3 years period, the engagement officer that they had was regularly visiting the moorings and kind of doing education and a big engagement piece with all regularly with all the kind of with all the vessels that were kind of moored in there. And so this kind of report will have kind of important data for us with regards to kind of eco moorings usage data, surveys conducted to boaters, data from in terms of the reduction of the amount of complaints, enforcement data. And so all of this will be useful. But because I knew that I was going to be here with you, and the meeting that I had with Islington, with the Islington officer was literally yesterday. I wanted to make sure that I had the latest kind of updates from them. They gave me some kind of figures. So one of them, and they are all very positive. So one of them is that the eco moorings usage increased during this period by 140%, all due to the engagement. So they had like before they had like 200 and something boaters using the eco moorings, and after this 2 year of constant engagement, that number moved up to almost 700, 650 or something like that. So that's really good work and very positive news. Another one very important news is that the amount of complaints from smoke nuisance during this period kind of reduced, in particular when it comes to diesel generators, which was a very important cause of nuisance, because obviously with the direct access to electricity, diesel generators and the use of diesel generators stopped being used. There's no needed anymore. So, you know, this all looks really promised. I'm looking, both myself and Charlie, looking really forward to kind of get our hands into that report and try to see what we can learn from this, and what aspects we can perhaps mimic to our project in terms of a good practice, and lessons learned. With regards to the system itself, in terms of the infrastructure, I don't have yet the specific details of how the brand or the type of infrastructure that's going to be installed, but I was told that it's going to be, again, very similar to the system that has been installed in Islington, because it's the same kind of contractor that is
Makes
doing the
sense, yeah.
installation. But it's basically people will have to sign in to some kind of online platform, and then they will be able to pay with their cards directly the amount of electricity that they require for the time that they require. So that's how it's in theory is going to happen. In terms of cables, I assume that kind of some extensions could potentially be needed, some cabling from the part of the boaters, but the socket itself is just a normal socket that very similar to the ones that we have at home. So they will be able to kind of very easily kind of gain access to the electricity points. Yeah.
Great. I'm going to open it to the other councillors for questions now. Councillor Miles, you've had your hand up. Please go.
Yeah, thank you very much. So the first question is around a letter to residents. Will we be communicating to residents around formally as the council in the neighbouring area? Whilst these are, I think, physically located in James's ward, actually the nearest properties for some of them are situated in my ward. And so I guess part of it would be that I'd really like to be involved in some of these briefings directly, because it affects my residents directly. But secondly, are we, and if we are communicating to residents to ensure that we do include some that are in the nearest part of Summertown ward to this area? So that's the first question. The second is around the plans for the engagement officer. It's fantastic that we've got this up and running. We've been talking about it for a long time, and we had earlier, I think, as environment scrutiny, come up with a series of recommendations for some of the engagement work that could be done by them. So I'd be just interested to know what their work plan is and whether some of these earlier recommendations from the scrutiny panel will be taken on board for that. And then the third question is around the use of these by the non-continuous cruisers. Yeah, if they were just to move their boat temporarily down there, would they be able to just plug in as well? Just wanted to clarify that as well, please. Thank you.
Pedro, I'll just assume that you take that directly, those questions.
Yes, so communication to residents. So as I said, the engagement office is at the moment in the phase of gathering information. There is a comms kind of plan that is being kind of prepared. We intend to be doing something on the day for the inauguration, obviously. But we don't have anything kind of already kind of prepared. We're looking into those things in the comm strategy. We have plans to kind of also create a website on part of Oxford City Council so that we can kind of provide all the necessary information about the eco moorings, but also about other important stuff that will come out of of the work of the engagement officers, such as, for example, the air quality guidance for the waterways, which is a document that we intend to kind of prepare with the specific input of boaters as well, which is kind of a document where boaters should get access to all the meaningful kind of information that you need in terms of, how the eco moorings operates, what type of grants and funding available exists for them to retrofit their boats, what's the difference between the different heating systems in terms of emissions that they generate, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of kind of useful information that we're already able to pick from other local authorities that did something similar, and so that's also something that we would like to kind of prepare and include as part of this kind of comms material. But it's just to say that it's still kind of being developed, the how and the why of what we're gonna exactly do. I'm still expect to have a few meetings with our comms colleagues to kind of try to kind of organize that. The other work was on non-continuous cruises. So I guess you mean whether a permanent kind of boater decides to move their boat and go to that area. From the moment he does that, he starts being a visitor, isn't it? For all. So it's the moorings are managed by the Canal and River Trusts, and they cannot stay more than 48 hours, if I'm not mistaken, at Aristotle Lane. So that kind of aspect can and should be enforced by the trusts, because they have powers to kind of control the overstays. So that's an aspect that is for the trust to kind of manage and sort if it happens.
Yeah, may I, Emily, Chair, can I just come back on that particular point? Yeah, so just I do understand that there can be an issue with some of the some overstays on some of these continuous cruiser sort of moorings, and so I think that's just something that we might need to think about quite carefully around how that's managed with the trust, so that the eco mooring sort of the sticks or whatever you referred, the poles that are used are not being blocked by people who are not using them but are overstaying in that location. As I understand from some of the data, that can be an issue. So just wanted to flag that. And on the comms side, just to remind ourselves that there were some really concrete recommendations around focus groups that we could do with different voting communities. And this came up in a previous scrutiny panel where we were saying that even within the resident voter community, there are different segments who have different energy needs and usage patterns and such like, and so engaging with the series of different types of voters, profiling them to understand their different needs would be useful. And I think there was a suggested piece of research that could come out of that as well. So I'm not sure a recommendation comes out of it, but it's referring to recommendations we've already had. But I'd like to just table the recommendation that we do some kind of communication to the neighbouring residents around the footpath, particularly. And the temporary closure around that, and just briefing them about what's happening. So if it is possible to do a letter drop to them, I think that would be very helpful. I know that I get questions about this all the time, and I know James probably does too, around some temporary closures of the towpath. So if that is in advance, I think that would reassure residents, but also would support all of us councillors who have the towpath running through our wards with our communications with residents. Thank you.
And possibly copy that letter to ward councillors, because ward councillors are often so let's talk about recommendations in a minute, but yeah, I've jumped out of the process there, but I will accept that as a discussion for later. Back to the process. Councillor Harley, you have questions.
I do. Many of my questions have been already answered by previous speakers, but I just had two further ones. Are the boats that are here on a temporary basis privately owned, or are they hired from hire companies? And if the latter, are you engaging with those hire companies? And also, are there likely to be cables across the towpath, or will there be a system like the gully system from ODS for electric vehicles, or are the eco moorings sufficiently close to the edge of the towpath that there won't be any cable problems?
Right. We're talking about privately owned. I'm not aware of any kind of boating company that uses the visitors moorings. But I can check. I can ask the trusts, because they will have a better idea than we do about who moors in there. With regards to that second question, that's a very good question, and one for me to take out to Islington, perhaps on the next round of questions that we are preparing. That together with Councillor Miles' question about the non-continuous cruisers, because I think Islington, because they have in essence delivered the same type of project that we are, they will be able to answer that and provide us with the information that we need on those two.
Great, thank you, Pedro. Councillor Fry.
I was just going to add to what's already Pedro has said. I was going to say, first of all, there are companies who rent out boats for the summer mainly. I think one is College Cruises. We had, when this was a really big issue about the smoke and the pollution, I did get in touch. I thought, a nice message to, I think there were 3 main companies. And the main one, the most important one, totally refused to engage at all. They thought this wasn't something we should be interfering with, and it was up to the people hiring their boats. So we didn't go any further with them. But there are companies. I think it's easy to find out who they are, and they should be told all about this, of course. That was on that. And they may well be quite a sizable chunk of the continuous cruising volume, if you like. One good thing is, and after my meeting this morning with Pedro and Charlie, there is a very nearby resident who is a volunteer for Canal and River Trust, goes every morning along. He has, I can't remember what his title is, it's purely voluntary. He also does litter picking at the same time. And he goes and keeps an eye on a section of the canal on behalf of CART. and I think he seemed from the first response, Pedro is going to meet him, very enthusiastic about being involved and helping to explain. I also managed, because I know some of the boaters, I managed to put Pedro in touch with them, and I believe they're going to meet shortly. Now, these are permanent moored boaters, because the continuous cruisers is a more variable population. I mean, some come from quite far away. And that's going to be a challenge which I imagine Islington has faced and over the period has managed to resolve. So I hope that's the case. I think those were the main things I just wanted to clarify. But it's a great project. I think it's wonderful.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Fry. Pedro, I don't think you need to follow up on those. Those are just all to note, right?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. I have one more question, which is obviously hideous if you've just, looking at completing this project, which is how do we scale it? So, what's the next step? And we know Islington's doing it. Is anybody else doing it? Are we looking at a kind of future of a sort of EV equivalent network? What are the next steps? I know we haven't even put it in yet. Once we put it in and we've made it work with all these little details, what then? What after that?
So what we know at the same time that we kind of were granted this this funding was that Oxfordshire County Council was at the same time looking at commissioning a study which was looking at the potential electrification of the entire waterways in Oxford. So they were actually really happy that we had been granted this funding, because they started immediately looking at it as okay, this is our perfect trial. Let's see how this eco-moorings works, and if the usage data of the eco-moorings after installation shows that there's kind of a lot of usage, then there's the potential for us to kind of look at other sources of funding and try to escalate this.
Great, that's clear. Councillor Fry, is your hand still up? Or is it not still up?
No, this is just to go further than that. When I met them this morning, you may be aware that Charlie Macquarie's contract, which is funded by this project, is only for 18 months. And in the meantime, we once had a full-time waterways officer. It was then reduced, and that person has now moved on to another role. And I was saying, thinking of my hat as chair of the budget panel, it happens that the funding for Charlie is there until the end of the 25-26 budget year. So that's quite a way ahead. But it seems to me there's scope for a budget bid for 26-27 to maintain the funding for a position like this, because it seems to me, especially if we have evidence from this project, that this is a worthwhile use of council money.
Great, thank you for clarifying, Councillor Fry. Good. Okay, so I think we can actually move to the recommendations. Celeste, I'm going to get you to jump in a second. It felt like there were sort of two buckets of recommendations, one of which was the points to note, which a number of councillors made, and one of which was the actual firm recommendation, which was to communicate to local residents, particularly on the closure of the towpath, and to make sure that the ward councillors are copied into that, or at least notified of the letters. But Celeste, I'll hand over to you and see if you had any alternatives / additions.
Not at the moment, Councillor Kerr, no.
Great. Okay, is everyone, any further questions, issues, anything arising from the Eco-Moorings project update? Raise your hands now or forever hold silence. Great, in which case I will say thanks so much, Councillor Fry, Pedro, Councillor Railton. It is an essential element of the kind of improving air quality, and I think it's a really cool project that we're doing something so innovative, and let's hope that we can scale it across Oxfordshire with a successful pilot where all of those key learnings are kind of incorporated. So thank you all for explaining and attending. Great. The next presentation now, and I am bang on time, is the high-level challenges and constraints impacting the deliverability of solar opportunities at council car parks. So can I welcome Councillor Railton and Alice Jones and invite you to present the report.
Hi, evening everyone. Do you want me to flash up the report or?
Sorry, it's so much easier for people.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
You know,
Let me just grab
online.
it. Is that coming up okay?
Interestingly, no, but
No? Okay, let me try again.
Chair, while Alice is just getting that, if I may just briefly intrude, because this has also been subject to debates in council and so forth. So I just wanted to highlight that, you know, that this has been sort of long called for, that we did this piece of work, which sort of provides an overview of some of the challenges and so forth. So
great.
That's what's informed.
And it is page 41 of the agenda. Yeah, but I think we're ready, Alice.
Okie doke. So that's coming up okay, is it now? Perfect. So yeah, the paper gives a bit of a high level overview of some of the challenges involved with delivering solar canopies in the council's car parks. So just for a bit of context, to date we've engaged with Low Carbon Hub, who have done a desktop pre-feasibility study looking into the challenges surrounding securing off-takers for the energy generated at any solar canopies installations. And we've also had a meeting with a solar installer and a charge point operator who would be looking to use the offtake for EV charging provisions as well. So we're at a very immature stage of kind of looking into potential options for the offtake. But the main challenges which have been identified has been the cost involved with installing this.
Yeah. Sorry,
the solar canopies. So for context, the cost of installing a solar canopy is about 2 to 3 times more than a rooftop solar project of the equivalent size. So it's obviously a considerable increase in costs. And those costs only increase in relation to kind of the set out of the car park. So if there's a need for custom framings, and the cost will increase even more. And because of the increased cost, it's only kind of viable if a really large array is installed. So installing a considerable array obviously then leads to the question of what happens to the energy. So there's kind of 3 options for the energy offtake, and that would be commercial off-takers via a private wire, smart community energy schemes, and then electric vehicle charging provision. So in terms of the off-taker in the form of a commercial private wire, that would generally work with a small handful of customers who would offtake that energy. But the initial analysis of, for example, the Park and Rise suggests very large systems, which equates to around 2.5 gigawatts of annual demand. So finding a handful of commercial kind of organizations with that considerable demand in proximity to the solar array is really tough, because you can't run cabling across highways, and then there's increased considerations with kind of way leaves and planning requirements, etc. So the initial analysis that Low Carbon Hub did was finding it difficult to marry commercial off-takers and the council's car parks. But as I said, it was just a pre-feasibility desktop study. So that's not to say it's impossible, but it just looked tricky at the moment. Another barrier facing solar canopy installations is the current lack of grid connections the UK is facing. So any solar generation project will require a connection to the grid, and then the off-taker will also require a connection to the grid to kind of hedge against any times the solar is not generating, and potential shutdown failures, etc. Kind of the last challenge of solar canopies is the additional drainage that needs to be installed. This was an issue that was affected by the Blackbird Leys Leisure Centre solar canopy installation, which is quite a small solar array compared to the ones that we're looking at with Low Carbon Hub. But in terms of the opportunities, obviously it would contribute to the UK and the councils and ZCOP's net zero ambitions, increasing renewable energy within the city, and then could offer the council an additional source of revenue. And kind of the revenue streams differ depending on the form of off-taker, and even within kind of EV charging, there seems to be lots of different financial models that could be worked out. So next steps at the moment would be to engage with an organisation like Greater Net Zero Hub to kind of carry out a more detailed feasibility study and look for grant opportunities that might be able to fund that detailed feasibility study.
Great, thank you. I'm going to turn it over. Thank you, guys. It's very clear, you know, it's a good idea. There's lots of space. It's much more expensive to do than alternative forms, and therefore needs to have close by electricity demand. And obviously that's inherently an issue when you're talking about park and ride car parks, where there literally is not often close by electricity demand. So that's the kind of my key understanding from this report, which is very clear. Thank you. Councillor Miles, question from you.
Yeah, so just I guess it's useful just to remind ourselves which are the city council owned car parks that potentially would be large enough to meet at least some of the viability criteria potentially. So I realise that there are some of the city centre ones possibly not, it's more the park and rides. So if you could just remind us which of those are owned by the city council. And then just to really, it talks about in the paper that the feasibility assessment has to be then set out comparing other viable uses for these car parks. And I wonder to what extent are you exploring other viable uses for these car parks currently? And my final point would be I would support a recommendation that you do progress with the feasibility assessment for implementing them based on what's set out in the paper. Thank you.
So just to speak to your first point, I think there was about 10 council car parks which were included in Low Carbon Hub's desktop feasibility. So I can update the report to include them, so that's clear. I won't list all of them now, but yeah, I can make an amends to the report.
Yeah, probably helpful, because also there's the ones that are like managed by other people, you know, like Oxford train station. That might be an interesting one. Obviously it's got that massive building next to it, so you know, yeah, and Westgate I assume is excluded, obviously because it's not solar, but like, you know, basically yes, please do that. That is a recommendation.
Yeah, okay.
I'm probably better placed to pick up the second question. So, oh, and by the way, in respect to the park and rides, to be clear, the ones owned by City Council are Redbridge and Seacourt. We don't own Pear Tree, we lease it, and we then manage the Oxford Parkway and Thornhill on behalf of the County Council. They are their park and rides. In terms of other uses, I think that if you look at Redbridge, for example, where there is already now the EV charging hub installed, I mean that gives you a sense of use of space that can be used. But then we're also closing some car parks. For example, the Oxpens car park is to be closed such that it becomes part of the wider Oxpens development there, and in respect of the large park and ride car parks that we have, Redbridge in particular, but also Seacourt and, you know, potentially Pear Tree. we have to consider, are there other things that we could be doing there that could also generate a return for the council? These are not the only park and rides that may be available for Oxford, as I'm sure members have read plenty about the one that was built in Aynsham and is yet to open, but might do at some point soon, we're told. There are other park and rides that the county council has suggested might be built and constructed around the city. And so I think I should just highlight that my colleagues in the property team keep these sites under constant review, and so it's not a given that they would always the spaces there would always be given over to cars, straightforwardly.
Thank you, Mish. Councillor Harley.
Well, Mish has more or less answered what I was going to ask about, which was, is there any liaison with the county over their car parks and the possibility of joint schemes on any of these?
Today, there hasn't been, but yes, there is the opportunity to. Yeah, and we should look to engage with them on this.
Councillor Miles, was that a question? Yes.
Yeah, it's just building on that response. I think it would be a useful recommendation to put forward that there is a engagement that is taken forward with the county council on joint schemes or joint feasibility on those sites that are owned by them and that we manage. We do have leverage over them if we are managing them, and so we have a degree of influence, and that should be used for that purpose. Thank you.
Great. Any further questions? Celeste, shall I summarize? Would you like? I think there's two recommendations, right? One of which is yes, proceed with proceed with the next steps, and the second is make sure we liaise with the county as that happens.
Sorry, Chair, could I just check that that is also an agreed recommendation to update the report with the list of city council?
Yes, thank you. That is the third recommendation. Thank you for clarifying. Agreed. Does that, Councillor Miles, Councillor Harley, Councillor Fry, is that a fair assessment?
Yeah.
Sorry, not Councillor Fry, just asked. Great. Okay, good. In which case, I suggest we move on, if everyone's happy, to the local nature recovery strategy. So can I welcome James Barlow and Chloe Edwards from County and invite you to present a quick verbal update.
Yeah, I'll introduce very, very quickly. Yeah, two parts to this. Chloe, who has led the local nature recovery strategy, will give an overview of the strategy and a presentation on that. I will then sort of tag on to that the bits that involve that are relevant to the city council and implementation. As you will hear in the presentation, there's a consultation out currently to which we will be responding next week. So what I will sort of talk about is the key bits that will form the part of our recommendation. So I will hand over to you, Chloe.
Thanks, James, and thanks everyone for having me. Just to check, you can hear me okay? Yeah, great. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start, hopefully technology is with us, and I'll screen share a short presentation that takes you through a summary of what we've been creating. But as a way of introduction, my name's Chloe Edwards. I've been working at Oxfordshire County Council now for a bit over a year, and I was employed once DEFRA had appointed Oxfordshire County Council as what's called a responsible authority. And that means we are tasked and asked to create these new local nature recovery strategies. And our area is Oxfordshire, but that needs to be done in conjunction with what are called the supporting authorities, which are our district, city council partners within the project as well. And so it's really important to be working closely on this. And it's great that officers and others have been able to do that from city. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. It does take time. So I'm going to work out how to share screen, and technology will be with us.
Lovely. Thanks, Chloe.
No worries. Are you able to see that now?
Absolutely.
Yay. Okay.
Great.
I'm wondering, I might now have broken it. Are you able to see the full screen, or are you seeing an odd version?
Can see. We can actually see your version, which is unusual.
Yeah,
your next
mine
slide
does that.
version. Yeah,
Bear
that's
with me.
unusual. Try one other thing, and if not, it's fine. It's large enough.
Don't worry, I'll just try and unput a few bits and then see if I can fix it. There we are.
We can look at. We can admire the number of partners involved at the moment.
How's that looking?
Yeah, perfect. That's ideal. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Yeah, so this is to introduce the local nature recovery strategy. This is one of the tools for nature's recovery, and specifically we're talking about Oxfordshire. We are looking and we're asked to identify a measure, a set of actions and a set of priorities that we could take to achieve a bigger and better, more joined up network of nature in Oxfordshire. And we're working with a number of different partners in a partnership approach to this project. And you can see listed on the right-hand side those logos representing partners who have been involved in shaping and steering this project. So this comes through the Environment Act legislation from DEFRA and from government. And this identifies that across England, the government want to see the creation of local nature recovery strategies. There are 48 areas identified by government in order to create these areas, and Oxfordshire is one of those that you can see mapped on the right-hand side there. We're working across borders with our partners as well to let them know what we're planning and doing, and we're asking them for their plans at borders too, so that we can look for opportunities to align at borders, because nature doesn't follow the rules. Sorry, the borders, not the rules. Nature follows rules. Right, I'm going to carry on. So the main purpose of these local nature recovery strategies is to identify locations to create or improve habitat, which is most likely to provide the greatest benefit for nature and the wider environment. The strategies don't force owners or managers of land identified to make any changes, but instead the government is encouraging action through opportunities for funding and investment to be targeted to those local nature recovery strategy areas. Okay, I think that's working now. There we are. So now on the screen, you can see a number of things that we heard from people earlier in the year. So through February and March 2024, we held a set of workshops. We had about 12 workshops, 2 in-person events with parish councils, and also an online survey. So through those different platforms and engagement opportunities with people, we received about 8,000 ideas of actions that could be taken to improve biodiversity in Oxfordshire. There are many that we can put through the local nature recovery strategy, and there are some important actions which are out of the scope for this strategy, but that we raise in the documents to explain their importance. So to touch on some of the things that we can do, we looked at a particular emphasis on the connectivity of habitats via the waterways. So for Oxfordshire, it was really clear for people that improving the quality of water and improving freshwater habitats topped the list of priorities nearly every time. There were also really important focuses on creating large connected sets of functioning healthy ecosystems for future generations to be able to benefit from and enjoy in Oxfordshire in the future. And then there was mentions of particular species as well. So we had mentions of a variety of different particular species, and we do have a species list. I'll talk to you a little bit about that as well. But there was a big emphasis on connectivity of larger and having more habitats across Oxfordshire. There are some elements that the local nature recovery strategy can't have an impact on, and so we can't change plans for developments, we can't influence where people develop, we can't stop any kind of infrastructure creation, and we can't change, fine or regulate people involved with sewage or water treatment. We recognise that all of those things need to be worked on and improved through the future for Oxfordshire as well. But what the LNRS can do is identify opportunities to create or improve habitats. So that's what we've been working on. So what I'll show you now is how some of the elements of the LNRS. So the 4 main things that we have created. The first is a draft statement of biodiversity priorities. This is a list of priorities to achieve in the county, And those are the outcomes that we want to see for biodiversity. So one of the examples is improving freshwater habitats, both their diversity, their structure, and also their water quality. And then next to any of those priorities, you'll also find a list of actions which would need to be taken to help achieve the priority. So that refers to restructuring rivers or making improvements to creating habitats that might be able to filter out pollution, elements like that. So those are all found on the Statement of Biodiversity Priorities, and they cover grasslands, they cover the river network, as well as touching on actions that could be taken in the wider environment, agricultural land holdings, as well as near towns, cities, near people as well. The second document is called the Draft Species Priorities List. And when we created this, we started off by assessing how many species were considered to be threatened or near threatened with extinction or loss from Oxfordshire. We've got 883 species on that list. And we were asked by government to make this a short and manageable list, which is challenging, of course, but many of those species, those 800 plus species, would benefit from a bigger, better, more joined up network of nature. So we're already looking to be creating that through the LNRS. So this list touches on those species who need something really particular or additional to help their recovery in the county. An example is Barbary carpet moth, which would require the planting of a specific food plant, and that could benefit the moth to continue surviving into the future. And then in other areas, we have examples where curlews require fencing around their nests to increase chances of successful breeding and hatching. So there's things like that on our list. The third document is a longer description of the county, of biodiversity in the county, opportunities for recovery. And we talk there about a lot of the actions people are already taking in Oxfordshire to improve habitats across the county. So that's quite an interesting, but more narrative context setting document there for why we need to be achieving the creation improvement of habitats in the county. And then the fourth element is the draft local habitat map. And I'll show you a bit more how that looks and functions later. But these are the areas in purple where we identified particularly important areas that need the creation or improvement of habitats in the future. And that builds out from some of those existing areas of sites of special scientific interest, special areas of conservation, designated local wildlife sites, and so on. So within the documents, if you ask me what they do, we have identified a collaboratively created set of local priorities to achieve for biodiversity in Oxfordshire. So this document, the documentation is the statutory format. It's supported by DEFRA and by Natural England. And we're in a draft process now. So we're showing that draft to people, and we're looking to create a final version at the start of next year. What do? They enable local people and organisations to submit funding bids based on the priorities and the actions that we have listed, with the knowledge that those actions are supported by a range of organisations across the county, both local, but also some national bodies too, and that those are considered to be particularly important actions and priorities to achieve for Oxfordshire's biodiversity. And then the documents will also be reviewed, monitored and republished every 3 to 10 years. And that timeframe is at the discretion of the Secretary of State, but it will be required that we update the maps and documents in the future. So they will become a sort of live version of what has happened with, again, recommendations based on the latest information at the time. So there are some actions in there that go across the county, things about creating graded margins up to hedgerows that can support birds and farmland species, creating and improving wildlife-rich corridors through or near towns and cities in the county, and also measures about infield trees, dead wood, hedge creation, traditional orchard creation. And then we also have those specific species on our list that I talked about. So what I'm going to do now is show you how the map functions. So this dark green network shows you any locations where the LNRS has recommended that habitats be created or improved in the county. And as we zoom in, I'm taking you in this case to Charlton on Otmoor. And as you zoom in, you'll see this network clear up. And anywhere in this dark green area, we have identified actions that could be taken to improve or create habitats. So what I've done in this example is I've clicked here, and you get a text box that pops up. and it says there are 1 of 5 actions that could be taken here. So in total there are 5, and this text is showing you the first one. To go through them, you can click here. So I'll show you how that works. By clicking that area, we get a response that says here you could create wetland habitats that contain a matrix of various habitat types that are suitable for that site. So that could be things like wet grasslands, ponds, ditches, hedgerows, trees, wet woodland. And then if you wanted to see the other actions that could be taken in that location, you click here, and it will show you another one is to restore river diversity, manage rivers and riparian habitats to achieve good ecological condition. Click again, you can see that it's also suitable for creating new areas of lowland meadow, floodplain meadows, to create new areas of good quality grazing marsh, and finally another opportunity to create new areas of wet woodland. And some of those actions can stack up and align with each other. Some you might want to choose one over the other. And that really is down to the people who own or manage the land at that local level to make that decision based on what's most suitable for them. What we're asking people at the moment to do is to add comments to this map tool. Directly, you can select pins, you can add them onto the location, and you can say whether you agree, whether you disagree, or whether you want to tell us something else. So you might want something particularly added, you might want to change the boundary slightly so that we encompass a field at an edge that perhaps we've missed. Or you might want to tell us that actually some of the information we might hold is wrong, and so we need to go and check that site and look at the data on the ground more clearly. And so those are the sorts of things that could be coming back to us. So overall, we have this exciting, significant opportunity to set ambitions for Oxfordshire through this particular tool for nature. As I say, it's one of a number of tools. And we are, with this network, aiming to focus resources to achieve local priorities. So we weren't able to map all the actions that could be taken everywhere. We were asked to be quite selective with the mapping. And we've done that to the best of our ability so far anyway. And so you can see in orange any existing areas of importance to biodiversity. Those are defined by government. So the areas that we've mapped in there are the areas that we were allowed to. They are local wildlife sites, the SSSIs, the special areas of conservation, as well as any irreplaceable habitats. So that's things like ancient and veteran trees that we have recorded, as well as any ancient woodland or lowland fens that we've got records of as well. We've got a methodology report online if you want to see how those areas were created. They currently cover 6.5% of the county. And that is quite low compared to some other areas of England. So we have an opportunity here to create areas that could become of particular importance to biodiversity. And that's that green area, that network that I showed you previously. And that now covers about 30% of the county. So combining those two together, we have a network shown here that covers 35% of the county where resources could be focused to achieve local priorities. And there are still things that people could do outside of those mapped areas, and those actions are written into the statement of biodiversity priorities. So if you still want to do things for public spaces, hedgerow creation, on agricultural land, around deadwood or orchard creation, there are opportunities across the county, and it wasn't always suitable for us to map where people should take those, and instead they're incentivised at the county level across Oxfordshire. So whilst we haven't mapped them, you can find them on the list of priorities, and you can know that you're still contributing in that way, and you can use that to inform funding bids. So our documents and our maps are drafts, they're not perfect. So what we're doing at the moment is inviting local people and organisations who've got on the ground knowledge to help us improve the priorities, the species priorities, and the map tool as we continue to develop the strategy in the coming months. And early next year, once we've heard back from our consultation, we'll be making changes that can help us create that final version of this first LNRS for Oxfordshire to publish before the end of July 2025 is what we're looking to work to. And before the 1st of December, that's when our consultation closes. You can access the consultation through this link here. And so far we are 30 days in or so with less than 2 weeks to go. We've had over 5,000 people visit the page, 2,200 downloads of the documents. That doesn't include the map. So then we've had a lot more people viewing the map separately. We've had over 200 responses on the map and about 50 written responses, and we're expecting to get more responses in now as we get towards the end of the consultation. So I'm aware that Oxford City is also looking to do that, and I'm really grateful so that we can focus in on that area as well through the consultation and look for opportunities to make amendments. So that's all from me. Hopefully I've stuck to time, but thank you very much. It's
excellent. You did stick to time. And also, can I just say thank you for a presentation which was both exceptionally clear and had loads of content in, and those two things are just great. So well done. Can I turn it over now to councillors for questions, please?
Is it best if I add my bit and then we have questions?
James,
on?
I'm so sorry. I thank you for politely putting me back in my box. My apologies. Please, may you speak.
I do hesitate because, yeah, I agree, and my bit will be far less interesting than what we've just heard. So I apologise in advance. So yes, this mostly relates to what we will be providing in the consultation response. I will be brief. Yeah, so as we've heard, the LNRS identifies opportunities within the county and therefore the city to best sort of aid conservation, protection, enhancement of nature, biodiversity, identifying priorities, areas for nature recovery, and how to target those areas. It is a strategy, and it's very much opportunities led. It's not an action plan, and it's down to the county as a whole. In fact, Chloe, you touched upon how people can go about those and utilising the strategy, organisations, residents, businesses and the councils. And work is ongoing by organisations, including the Local Nature Partnership, to make best use of the strategy. So for the City Council, we see, as in the council in particular, not the city, we see one of the key aspects relating to the biodiversity net gain aspects through the planning process. So the LNRS is a valuable tool in helping to identify where areas of off-site BNG from plan applications can be delivered for the most ecological value within the county. This will help implementing where sites do need to offset. This will help in implementing it in the local area and help deliver our local plans, biodiversity priorities. As Chloe alluded to as well, there is sort of a constraint set up on how to go about mapping or what to map and how much can be mapped. So there are likely to be other locations of value for ecology within the city. Part of those may be identified in the consultation, but it also links into our wider green infrastructure network, which is or will be, hopefully, defined in the upcoming local plan. So it's likely that it will designate its own sort of green infrastructure network based on the priorities that has been set. So they're all tools that work together, identify where is valuable for nature recovery. There are some sites within the LNRS mapping that overlap with some of the local plan allocations. It is our understanding that it's not a constraint, again, as Chloe alluded to, it's not a constraint in development. It's opportunities. It shouldn't make sites harder to develop. We believe that it might actually aid delivery of BNG as sites, priority habitats within those areas will get an uplift when calculating the BNG in the planning process. So the one caveat is that DEFRA are yet to confirm this. This is based on our best understanding. We expect them to sort of publish this at the end of the year, which is after the consultation. So there's some slight uncertainty about that, and if for any reason there was a potential impact on delivery of sites, we would need to revisit our response. But I would flag that we don't expect that. This is very much just to flag for the committee. So yes, hopefully I've gone over that quickly enough. We're very much supportive of that, and like I said, I realise there's a couple of points I seem to be picking on there, but it's very much the default is we support most of it. And it's just flagged up.
Makes sense. Yeah, good. And thank you for clarifying. Right, now I will turn it over to questions for any councillor, to either James, yeah, to anybody really. Any councillors have any questions, either James or Chloe? Sorry, my screen is jumping out. Councillor Harley, please.
Yes, it was just, have you included city parks in your list or liaising with the city council over these? And are golf courses and allotments part of your scheme?
Yeah, so I think I've heard most of that come through. So in terms of allotments and any kind of parks or green spaces, they were able to be selected for inclusion in the network or the area. Some are mapped as areas that have an action on the map tool. Some don't have a particular action mapped to them. But what people could do for those is have a look at the list of biodiversity priorities that we've created and then decide for themselves whether that's something they want to take forward as a priority for their location. And that would be the kind of thing we would encourage. So if you had a particular green space local to you, it
Such
wasn't
as a golf course. Just to clarify, golf courses
sorry,
are
golf courses. Yeah,
yes.
They were able to be selected as well. So there was no yeah, we didn't remove anything from selection other than impermeable spaces and buildings. So they should have been removed. So we shouldn't be mapping creation of woodland or grassland onto somebody's house or onto a car park, for example. And if you do spot any of those, please flag that up. That shouldn't be there.
Right.
But things like golf courses, allotments, green spaces, amenity grassland, all of those were able to be selected for a habitat creation or improvement opportunity. We use soil data to help us understand the type of habitat suggestion that would be applied in those locations. So we're trying to select and suggest actions that are suitable for the type of soil, but we're also looking at the habitats that happen near or in those locations and trying to connect up habitats as well. So find opportunities that are sensible based on the soil and the existing habitats. In terms of allotments, we have heard a couple of conversations recently where people might like to see specific allotment or community growing space measures be brought in. Currently, we haven't got those listed on our priorities or actions, and there is scope for us to be looking to do that. So that's a conversation that we'll be having. But if you'd like to see those in, you'd be able to tell us through the consultation and put more weight into that kind of recommendation, because we don't have them at present.
Great, thank you. Councillor Harley, let me know if that does not answer your question, but I think it does. So over to Councillor Miles for your question.
Thank you. It's just really a question about how these different geographies that have been identified within Oxford are going to then feed into the City Council's own strategies around biodiversity, increased canopy cover, for instance, as well. And will this inform then District Council's strategies going forward? And is there a formal channel for that to happen? Thank you.
Shall I pick up on that one first, or entirely? Yes, I think it's fair to say that this will be, this is very high level as it covers the county. So it's certainly something that we will bear in mind when we deliver the biodiversity strategy, which, as we heard previously, we've had some resourcing issues on. There may be additional priorities as well. They're identified within the city, but it's certainly sort of a basis for us to work with, and we will have a lot of stakeholders and various involvement when we come to do the biodiversity strategy, and this will sit along those as informing it.
Great, thank you. Are there any further questions? I do not have any questions. Lovely, in which case I will say thank you for attending. And yeah, thanks for a great and clear report. Much appreciated. There are no, sorry, just to be clear, there are no other recommendations, right? We've moved on.
No, I think the plan is we will run our response via Councillor Elton as a portfolio holder before submitting it next week.
Emily, if it's appropriate and allowable for me to do this, just the opportunity to share a quick glimpse of the Oxford area. Hopefully you can see that on the screen. And you can see that these are the pins, comments from local people or organisations at the moment. So you can see people starting to respond to some areas, and just to hopefully use this as a bit of a platform to let people know that they can also do that. So they can come on here and leave comments about their local areas if they'd like to do that as well. Sorry to be cheeky.
Not at all. Is it helpful for you if we, as councillors, local councillors, encourage people to go and make comments?
Absolutely, yeah. We'd like to hear from as many people as possible on especially areas around them, and to have a look at the actions that we've mapped. So everyone's got a role on that as well if they'd like to do that.
And 2 weeks till close is just the only thing I'm slightly concerned about. That's correct, right? It won't be open, or what will happen if people make comments after 2 weeks?
So we should be, well, I need to speak with our JS team on how we manage that, but we shouldn't be able to accept comments beyond that point. So unfortunately, we have to close down the consultation at some point, even though I'd like to try and get it a bit earlier. But yeah, that will be our close for receiving comments. So we're just trying to really do that push at the moment to make people aware of how they can do that if they'd like to.
And that's, yes, understood. Okay, so yeah, I'm just looking at the map. Okay, fine. So basically we can help. This is slightly off topic, I accept, by sharing, but people need to comment within the next couple of weeks. Yeah,
exactly. Thank you. Yes.
Got it. Thank you. And then I clicked the wrong button. So thank you for attending. Thank you, both of you. And I think there are no further recommendations. So thank you, everyone, for coming. I'm going to now move on to the remainder of the agenda, which is the work plan. And obviously, Chloe, James, Councillor Elton, if you drop off, feel free to do so.
Thank you.
So, thank you for coming. Right, moving on to the remainder of the agenda, the work plan. So the work plan is included in the agenda pack. So let me just come up to that. That is page 16. Just give you a moment to jump onto page 16. So this kind of our next date is the 26th of February. These are the provisional reports that we are likely to see. I probably should screen share, but I'm gonna not screen share because it's page 16 of the publicly available agenda. And so just, I suppose my question to other councillors is, do you have any feedback at this stage on whether that is, whether there's any other reports you'd like to hear instead, or whether this is a sufficient selection for next meeting?
Chair, may I?
Please.
Yeah, I just wonder whether we keep on asking about climate adaptation and the plans going forward around that, because we've been focusing as a council mainly on the mitigation side, and just I don't know whether it's appropriate, and Mish might be able to advise on this, that I understood that there was some work going on around climate adaptation, and whether we can have an update on that at some point in the new year as to the status, because I think there was some linkage with county-wide work on that. So when would that be appropriate to look at? Thank you.
Mish, can you take that?
I'm probably actually going to ask Tina to come in, because I know that she spoke to county recently. Councillor, you're absolutely right. The adaptation work is led by county, and it's a big old piece of work too. Tina, do you think that would be timely?
So the county are finalising the climate adaptation report at the moment. It's currently a draft, and we've fed back into it, and they're giving us an update shortly. So I imagine in the new year it will be pretty finalised, so we could ask them to come and provide an update at that point.
Great. So Celeste, can you take that as a possibility for the 26th of February?
Yes. Just to check, 26th of February, is that something that's feasible, Tina? Is that
I'm sure that will be feasible, because it should be finalised before then, I imagine. So yeah.
And if not, the 27th of March. So maybe take the recommendation as could be for the next meeting or the meeting after.
Yeah. I mean, if we haven't got a biodiversity or an ecologist, we're going to be struggling to give you a biodiversity update.
That was going to be one
with
of
any
my
considerable
questions.
length, to be honest.
Yeah.
So yeah, that makes sense.
So that item 4 on the 26th of February, the biodiversity strategy, might flip for the county mitigation strategy. Sorry, not mitigation. And then, but yeah, can we leave that with you, Celeste?
Absolutely, yes, Chair.
Awesome. Any other questions or concerns or suggestions for the work plan? Great. Thank you, everyone. Sorry, my mouse is really quite noisy. Just on the recommendations, I think you've probably seen in the agenda pack, Cabinet's set out their full responses in the agenda pack, which I've now lost. There we go. It's page 22, I think. So just to see if anyone here has any questions or any comments further to those responses of Cabinet. it's just, yeah, it's broadly speaking for noting. And dates of future meetings, we've sort of implicitly just discussed that under the work plan, but just to advise you all that the next meeting will be on Wednesday, 26th of February at 6 p.m, unless any of you need to change that, in which case, please drop me a note and we can adjust it. Everyone happy? Great. Thank you everyone for attending. We finished 14 minutes early, so that's good. And yeah, thanks everyone for all the time you put into this. I think it's extremely useful for us to have a kind of regular scrutiny function on something as important as climate. So appreciated. And also a big thank you to Celeste, whose first meeting it was. Thank you, Celeste. You're doing a great job, and really appreciate you taking over and helping us manage this meeting. So thank you, Celeste.
Thank you as well, Chair. Thank you.
Great. Lovely. Thanks, everyone. We'll speak